taxpayers get out of Washington's debt deal. Here to tell us is the man who knows as well as anyone, House Majority Leader Eric Cantor. Mr. Cantor, thanks for being here.
James, it's a pleasure.
And Peggy Noonan, our columnist, is also here to help me with the questioning of Mr. Cantor. And the first question, we've seen the headline number, looks like $2.4 trillion in spending cuts over the next decade. I know some of these are projections. You can't control what future Congresses do. How confident, or how much of that are you confident will actually be cut?
Well, I think, James, if we step back a second and look at what really happened in this deal, it certainly was not a perfect piece of legislation. I don't think anybody's satisfied with it. I do think that there are some incremental victories here that we ought to accept and try and build upon. The first is the struggle that ensued over the last several months really had to do with the fact that we have, as a Republican majority, members who really have come to Washington to change the system. And what this bill did is it says we are no longer going to just increase the debt limit without exacting some kind of spending cuts. Everyone knows that Washington's got a spending problem, and that is fueling this tremendous amount of borrowing that's going on. So that's the first, I think. The second is the fact that really it is all cuts, no tax increases. And one of the things that was central to the disagreement throughout the last several months in Washington was Republicans felt now certainly is not the time to raise taxes on the middle class in this country, on small businesses in this country, or working families, because as we know, the economy is ailing. And that is counterintuitive to think you ought to raise taxes. And then lastly, I think we will have the discussion about deficit spending, about the need to get the fiscal house in order for the next several months. And it is central, I think, to doing that and to making the president defend his policies, which have immediately, after the passage of this bill, continued to push more taxes and more spending.
Let me ask, I am very interested in the president's negotiating style. You literally were in the Oval Office with him negotiating in the weeks leading up to the final bill that passed. What is he like as a negotiator? Does he negotiate like a business person? Does he negotiate like a politician? I mean, what is his style? What surprised you? Did he say, Eric, don't call my bluff? And what did you think of that when he said it? What was your thought? What did you think he was saying?
Let me start
That's a four-part question.
Let me start with the last part. The last part. And yes, he did. He turned to me and said, Eric, don't call my bluff. He said, I'm going to take this to the American people.
What was his affect at that time?
Well, he was agitated, but his response was to a question that I had asked. I had asked the question whether he would relent and come off of his insistence that somehow we raise the debt ceiling without achieving the dollar-for-dollar cuts. And that's what agitated him so much. The reason why I had asked that is because we were so far apart on the size of the cuts. And the reason why we were so far apart on the size of the cuts is because at every turn throughout the last 3 months, he and his party insisted that we couldn't make the necessary cuts without raising taxes. So, you know, when you ask what kind of negotiator he is, to me, it is not someone who has a grounding in what business is about in this country. I don't think he's ever run a business. I don't think he's ever really created a job. And I think, frankly, he's in over his head as to what to do about this economy. So immediately what we've seen are policy differences, certainly between he and me, and that doesn't sit well with him. So his negotiating style, to me, seems he'll default to the politics, which is what brought on the comment, Eric, don't call my bluff.
Now, you talked about, and you deserve great credit for holding the line against tax increases, but as you pointed out, this economy is really showing bad signs in terms of consumer spending, got some bad manufacturing data. I don't think anybody thinks Friday we're going to get a great employment report. Is there any hope, based on what you've just told us, that we might actually get some pro-growth tax reform, maybe some tax relief, something to juice the economy?
Well, you know, again, James, I don't know if I can give you a positive answer to that. I know everyone wants some optimism right now, and Lord knows we need it. But what I've seen is a real divergence in worldviews between the president and his party and where most of us as conservatives are. You know, it's almost as if You know, the president and his party really are bent on promoting a welfare state and then thinking about our capitalistic system, our free enterprise system second. And their emphasis throughout the last several months has been that. It has been trying to promote programs of economic redistribution. And if you hear them speak, it's always about, you know, everyone should pay their fair share. And I think the difference is we believe everyone should have a fair shot. And it really is the difference between whether you think, you know, the government is in place to ensure equal outcomes, or whether we should, as elected officials, try to promote a situation where everyone's got equal opportunity to go and earn the outcome, earn the success. And so because there is such a difference here, James, I'm worried about the prospects of real fundamental tax reform that can actually produce the result we want, which is to grow this economy.
How were you, I want to get back to process just a little for a second. How confident were you through the last 10 days of the Republican count? Did you always know where you were in terms of the attempt to get the Boehner bill through? Did you always have a sense of what the count was, where you were?
Well, you know, Peggy, the process of whipping the vote is actually a little bit more intricate than one may think. And we have an excellent majority whip in Kevin McCarthy, who I've worked with when I was whip. And you know, it is always trying to make sure that members have access to the information so that they're educated to be able to make their decision as to which way they're going to come down. And the situation has been so fluid. You know, each day almost, you're getting something else that really was changing either in the closed-door meetings or speeches that were made. It made it very difficult to pin down exactly what you were whipping. So it was, I would say to you, I don't think that the count necessarily was locked down until the end.
At what point did the Tea Party, if Tea Party backed candidates, at what point did they become really confident and have a sense that they were going to change things here? Do you know, did you ever pick up anything that made you think, oh my gosh, something's going on here, this is a changing point?
Well, remember what, you know, the Tea Party backed members, and I think all of us would think we've got some of that, because the acronym itself, Taxed Enough Already, represents, I think, a limited government perspective, that you want to somehow starve the beast in Washington so that you can allow for the private sector to grow. So you can take away decisions of allocating capital, of deciding who wins, who loses away from Washington, and put it back where it belongs, with the people. So, you know, but I do think that if you look at the members, the 87 new freshmen that have come to our conference, and make up a third of our majority, they have always come very, very certain in what their mission was. And their mission was, stop the spending and let's get a more favorable environment for growth.
So you weren't really taken aback then by what happened with the Boehner bill?
No, I think that those who really feel that changing the system is paramount, which I would say probably most of us do, also feel that in the end, if the ultimate check on the system would be a forced constitutional amendment to say you got to balance the budget. And that seemed to become a lot more pronounced as the weeks unfolded. And that's really what played out the last Thursday night when the original plan that we had put forward under the Speaker's leadership had some problems, had a hiccup there, and how we then had to go in and hard link the balanced budget amendment to the vote that finally passed the House. I think that that was maybe a new wrinkle, and that was how much inclusion of a balanced budget amendment would do, and what type of inclusion. Was it just going to be to guarantee a vote in the Senate, which hasn't taken place since 1997, or was it going to be to make sure we weren't going to increase the debt limit until it passed? And I think most people saw that the Senate was not going to pass one, and what ended up prevailing was we didn't want to go past August 2nd because of the unknown. I mean, who knew what was going to happen if you went past August 2nd? And I think most of us were unwilling to take that risk because of the fragility of the economy.
I wanted to talk about what happens next in terms of this special congressional committee, 3 members from each party, from each house coming together. In November, they're going to have to come up with $1.5 trillion in cuts. First question, CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, probably, maybe before then, is going to have to acknowledge this economy is weak, and the deficit over the next 10 years is bigger than they've been anticipating. So, assuming that new reality sets in Washington, is it possible that you'll say 1.5 trillion is not enough, we need to do more?
Well, what I think we also have to bear in mind is that, you know, the deficit savings that we may achieve through spending cuts could very well be dwarfed by the fact that we're not seeing a growing economy, that we're not seeing jobs created, and we don't see some action for wealth creation. And I think that that really has to be the focus here. Going back to sort of what I've seen over the last 3 months in these meetings with the administration, they don't believe that any grand deal or bargain can be struck without raising taxes. Even if you envelop that in the veil of tax reform, they do not believe that you can implement that without raising taxes on those that they accuse perhaps of being at the upper end of the income schedule and they would allege are unfairly out of having to pay their fair share. So given that that's their position, I think the focus needs to stay on spending. This select committee has been tasked with the job of trying to identify those cuts. And frankly, in the Biden talks, we identified close to between $2 and $2.3 trillion in cuts that we can pick right up off the table and put to work. Now again, that would take the other side saying, okay, let's just focus on cuts, not tax hikes. But I can tell you, as we saw things play out in the House is not going to support increasing taxes. And again, this economic news that keeps coming out, I think would make the case even stronger. We ought not be raising taxes.
Have you as a Republican leader in the House, felt out any members about being on this special committee for cutting? And the members you've gone to have said, whoa, buddy, I would never want to be on that thing. Have you had people sort of look away when you're coming down the hall? Are people dodging your phone calls? Has anyone said, no, listen, I don't want to do that?
Well, the Speaker is the one who makes the selection, and I have gotten a lot of calls and emails from members who actually want to serve, and they want to see about participating in solving the problem. And this is coming from members who even voted against the piece of legislation that passed the other day. So I think there's a lot of commitment to try and sort all this out. I think what the last couple months have showed us, none of this is easy, and frankly, it may very well be that November 2012 is what we've got to focus on if we're going to actually change the direction of this country.
Today's the President's birthday. Do you have a birthday wish for him? One that is substantive and will make a headline, and I'll be very happy that I asked this question.
I didn't know it was his birthday, so I would like just to wish him a happy birthday. And if I know him, I mean, he is a very dedicated father and husband. I'm sure he'll be spending time with Malia and Sasha and the First Lady, and I wish him a very happy day.
Wanted to ask you, speaking of the president, after I think it was right after signing the debt limit increase, he came out and he was talking up what sounded like more stimulus, and in particular he mentioned an infrastructure bank. Our colleague Mary O'Grady can tell you what disasters these have been in Latin America, but for this country, is that going anywhere on the Hill? What should we expect there?
Well, just the fact that right on the day that he is signing the bill to increase the debt limit after all we've been through, and then goes to advocate for more so-called stimulus spending and to continue advocating for higher taxes, it's as if he doesn't get it. I mean, really, after all we've been through. So, you know, this idea of an infrastructure bank, you know, I think when folks hear that, it smacks of the risk of Washington somehow getting its hands on taxpayer dollars and not making sure that those dollars are being put to the most efficient use. And that's what bothers me about centralizing capital in Washington. It's all about trying to stay away from crony capitalism. So I'm a little bit worried. I mean, we do all know that we need an infrastructure plan here. I mean, our roads, bridges, and the rest are in sorry shape.
But I mean, I'm wondering if this is going to be a theme of the next few years. Is now Republicans are holding the line on spending, focused on debt and deficits. Do you expect a lot of push to get a lot of off-budget programs going? You know, I don't know, Fannie and Freddie kind of rising bigger than ever. I mean, is this going to be a theme? Do you feel like you've kind of won the argument on the general budget, and now?
I think it's probably to be expected a political theme that we may look for, and what we have to be, I think, focused on is truth in budgeting here. I mean, the facts are the facts, and as long as we can explain our positions about trying to get the fiscal house in order, what we need to be able to do is to demonstrate that that is the better way for the people of this country. Get the fiscal house in order, come to grips with the fact that promises have been made that frankly are not going to be kept for many. And that's why when we came out with our budget, we said, look, let's at least put people on notice, but preserve those who are 55 and older and give them an indemnification, if you will, a hold harmless, that none of these changes are going to affect you, but the rest of us have got ample time to try and plan our lives so that we can adjust to reality here when you look at the numbers. And again, the math doesn't lie.
Right.
What kind of pushback do you expect from voters, from the American people in this sense? The economy, the numbers are not looking good, long-term trends are not looking good. Voters are going to look at the U.S. government and see, oh, they're cutting, cutting, and cutting. Do you not see some pushback coming there from voters, from a sense of public opinion? They want something done after all. Will they see cutting as doing something?
You know, I think initially, yes, because most people that I talk to in my district in Virginia or throughout the country realize that Washington is spending money it doesn't have. I think, and if I talk to small business people in my hometown of Richmond, they'll tell me, why are you wasting my taxpayer dollars the way you are in Washington? So I do think that there's a certain sense there that we have to get some reason. But we know, in looking at the numbers, you can't just do it by cuts alone. There has to be reform to the entitlement system, but more than that, there has to be, or equal to that, there has to be growth. You know, growth is a solution both to managing down the debt and deficit and to trying to meet people where they are, which is, I want to see myself, my neighbors get back to work and enjoy some more prosperity. You know, people, I think, at some point are tired of the pain. They want to be given some hope. And I think that sensible, prudent fiscal management can give you a foundation for that. But we need to lay out a vision for how America can lead again, for how our young people, our students coming through school now, will have the opportunities in this country the way we have, and to ensure that we can continue to innovate, to compete in this country. And I think those are the real themes politically that will be most prominent as we go towards November 2012.
Do you think a lot about, sorry James, I'll make it quick.
Oh no,
do you think a lot about, you're one of the guys running Congress. Congress is not broadly admired in the United States. Institutions in general are not broadly admired, but people particularly, they don't like Congress. Do you think a lot about that? Do you think a lot about how to turn its reputation around? Does John Boehner, is there a sense with the congressional leadership that, you know, this is a problem, that people don't respect one of the branches of government?
I do, and I know the Speaker thinks a lot about it. I think the Speaker, when he assumed the speakership, said he wanted to preserve the institution and make sure that its integrity was intact, whether it be from an ethics standpoint or just a process standpoint, to make sure there was certainty in the application of the rules. And I think from a broader perspective, all of us are concerned about that. And I think, Peggy, your point is institutions in general, whether it be a legislative body, whether it be the institutions of Wall Street, whether it be state.
Say the press.
whether it be a state or local government, you know, people are beginning to think that, wait a minute, what happened to my fair shot here? You know, it's like, why is it that, you know, when I see my house still underwater, what happened to those bad actors on Wall Street? Who's going after them? Who's making sure that doesn't happen again? When they look at sort of some of the corruption that exists in local and state government and say, wait a minute, what about my retirement monies? how does that get diverted to some political crony of an elected official? So I think in general, as America...
So how do you turn that around?
I think all of us need to start by putting you know, our money where our mouth is, so to speak. We all need to realize, you know, that first of all, numbers don't lie, and we have ourselves a situation where we've got to fix the fiscal situation in this country. But at the same time, we also have to return to what has made America what it is. I mean, I'm a grandson of immigrants, and when I think about, you know, my grandmother who came from Eastern Europe, you know, like many others of her generation, she left Eastern Europe with her family out of the need to leave religious persecution under the czars of Russia. She was lucky enough because she came here through the New York Harbor. And, you know, she landed after having eloped with her husband, my grandfather, and landed in Richmond because her brother had found some opportunity down there. And what happened was they had 2 sons, and then she lost her husband in the early 30s. She was like 31, 32. And she became a single mom, having to raise 2 kids. She went and opened up a grocery store, raised her 2 sons in a tiny apartment on top of that grocery store. And again, here is America. She didn't have formal education. She certainly didn't know the right people. She was of a religious minority as a Jew in America back then in the 30s. And yet she made it. She made it because
everything was possible.
It was free. She was unlike where she came from, where nothing was possible. I didn't care who you were or how hard you worked. It was because of where she lived, who her parents were, what her faith was. She was denied that potential. America is about infinite potential. And so we need to not only recognize reality on the fiscal front, but we got to go and refetch that identity of who we are as America. I know my kids want it. You know, I've got 3 teenagers, one who just turned 20, but they want that potential. They want this freedom that we know as America. And so when we look to see the institutions that are suffering right now, I think our country is suffering. It's suffering because somehow we need to reignite that spark in people.
Okay. Yeah. Mr. Cantor, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Pleasure.
And thanks to you. Please come back tomorrow and every weekday at noon Eastern for Opinion Journal Live. Thanks.